The winter storm had been raging for 3 days straight across the Montana countryside. Snow piled up against the fences of the Silver Creek Ranch, and the wind howled like angry spirits through the bare cottonwood trees. Marcus Wellington pulled his heavy coat tighter as he stepped out of his truck near the main barn. At 62, he had seen plenty of harsh winters on his sprawling cattle ranch, but this one felt different somehow. Marcus was not a man who showed emotion easily. Years of running one of the largest ranches in the state had hardened him into someone who made tough decisions without flinching. His workers respected him, but they also feared him. He demanded excellence and had little patience for weakness or excuses. The ranch employed over 40 people year-round, and Marcus knew every detail of the operation. Nothing happened on Silver Creek Ranch without his knowledge. That morning, Marcus had received a call from his foreman, Jake Morrison, about some unusual activity near the old storage shed on the far side of the property. Jake had been working for Marcus for 15 years and was not the type to get spooked easily. But there was something in his voice that made Marcus decide to drive out and investigate personally. The shed sat about 2 miles from a main ranch house, nestled in a grove of pine trees that provided some shelter from the wind. It had not been used for much in recent years, mainly storing old equipment and supplies that were rarely needed. As Marcus approached the building, he noticed tire tracks in the snow that looked fresh despite the ongoing storm. Marcus parked his truck and walked toward the shed, his boots crunching through the deep snow. The wooden door was slightly ajar, which was unusual because Jake always made sure all buildings were properly secured, especially during bad weather. Marcus pushed the door open wider and stepped inside. The shed was dimly lit by what little daylight filtered through a small, dirty window. Dust particles danced in the weak beam of sunlight, and the air smelled of old leather and motor oil. Marcus looked around, trying to determine what had caught Jake's attention. Everything seemed normal at first glance. Then he heard it, a soft whimpering sound, so quiet he almost missed it over the wind outside. Marcus froze, listening carefully. The sound came again, definitely from somewhere inside the shed. It sounded almost like a small animal in distress, but there was something different about it that made the hair on the back of his neck stand up. Marcus pulled out his phone and turned on a flashlight. He began moving slowly through the cluttered space, following the sound. Old farm equipment cast strange shadows on the walls, and cobwebs brushed against his face as he made his way deeper into the shed. The whimpering grew slightly louder, and Marcus realized it was coming from behind a stack of grain sacks near the back wall. He carefully moved the heavy bags aside, his heart beginning to pound for reasons he could not explain. What he found behind those sacks would change his life forever. There, barely visible in the dim light, was a large burlap sack that seemed to be moving slightly. The whimpering was definitely coming from inside it. Marcus stared at the sack for a long moment, his mind racing through possibilities. Could it be an injured animal that had somehow gotten trapped? But how would an animal have gotten inside a tied sack? With trembling hands, Marcus reached for the rope that held the sack closed. As he loosened the knot, the whimpering grew louder and more urgent. When he finally pulled the sack open, what he saw inside made him stagger backward in shock. Inside the sack, surrounded by chunks of ice, was a tiny baby. The infant was naked except for a thin blanket that was now soaked through with melted ice water. The child's lips were blue, and its small body was shaking uncontrollably from the cold. Marcus could see that it was a little girl, probably no more than a few days old. Her eyes were closed, but she was making soft crying sounds that cut through Marcus like a knife. For a moment, Marcus just stood there, unable to process what he was seeing. Someone had put this helpless baby in a sack with ice and left her in an abandoned shed during a blizzard. The cruelty of it was beyond his understanding. Whoever had done this had intended for the child to die, and they had nearly succeeded. Marcus quickly pulled off his heavy coat and wrapped it around the freezing baby. She was so small and cold that he could barely feel her breathing. He scooped her up gently, surprised by how light she was. The baby's crying grew a little stronger as she felt the warmth of his body and coat. "It's okay, little one," Marcus whispered, his voice rough with emotion he had not felt in years. "You're safe now." He carried the baby out of the shed and to his truck, cranking up the heat as high as it would go. The nearest hospital was over an hour away in good weather, and with the storm still raging, the drive would be dangerous. But Marcus knew he had no choice. This child needed medical attention immediately. As he drove carefully through the snow-covered roads, Marcus found himself talking to the baby, even though he knew she could not understand him. He told her she was going to be okay, that he would not let anything happen to her. The sound of his own voice surprised him. When had he last spoken so gently to anyone? The baby's crying had stopped, but Marcus was not sure if that was good or bad. He could see her tiny chest rising and falling, so he knew she was still breathing, but she seemed so fragile and weak. He pressed harder on the gas pedal, taking risks he normally would never take on the icy roads. Marcus had never been married and had no children of his own. He had always told himself he was too busy with the ranch, too focused on building his business to worry about family. But holding this abandoned baby, feeling her small body trembling against his chest, something deep inside him began to crack open. When they finally reached the hospital in Billings, Marcus rushed through the emergency room doors with the baby still wrapped in his coat. The medical staff immediately took over, whisking the child away to be examined and treated. A doctor told Marcus that they had arrived just in time. Another hour in the cold might have been too late. While the medical team worked on the baby, Marcus found himself pacing the waiting room, unable to sit still. A police officer arrived to take his statement about how he had found the child. Marcus told the officer everything he could remember, but he had no idea who might have abandoned the baby or why. Detective Sarah Chun was assigned to investigate the case. She was a small woman with sharp eyes who had seen too many cases involving child abuse and neglect. She questioned Marcus thoroughly about the circumstances of finding the baby, taking detailed notes about the location and condition of the shed. "Mr. Wellington," Detective Chin said after finishing her questions, "this baby is lucky you found her when you did. Based on what the doctors are telling me, she probably would not have survived much longer in those conditions." Marcus nodded grimly. "Do you have any idea who might have done this?" "Not yet, but we're going to find out. Someone wanted this baby dead, and they're going to answer for it." The detective's voice was hard with determination. The doctor came out a few hours later to update Marcus on the baby's condition. She was suffering from severe hypothermia and dehydration, but her vital signs were stabilizing. The medical team estimated she was about 3 days old, which meant she had been born around the time the storm started. "She's a fighter," the doctor told Marcus. "Most babies would not have survived what she went through, but she's going to need to stay here for several days while we monitor her recovery." Marcus found himself visiting the hospital every day while the baby recovered. He told himself he just wanted to make sure she was okay, but the truth was more complicated than that. Something about this tiny, helpless child had touched something in him that he thought had died years ago. The nurses began calling the baby Little Ice Angel because of how she had been found. They said she seemed to calm down whenever Marcus was in the room, as if she recognized his voice from their drive to the hospital. Marcus would sit beside her crib for hours, just watching her sleep and making sure she was breathing. Detective Chun kept Marcus updated on the investigation. The police had processed the shed for evidence and found tire tracks that matched several different vehicles. They were interviewing people in the area, trying to find anyone who might have seen something suspicious. But so far, they had no solid leads. The baby's case made the local news, and soon reporters were calling Marcus for interviews. He refused to speak to any of them, preferring to let the police handle all communication with the media. But the story spread quickly through the small communities around Silver Creek Ranch. As the days passed, Marcus found himself thinking about the baby even when he was not at the hospital. He wondered who her parents were and why they'd tried to kill her. He thought about what would happen to her once she was released from the hospital. The social services department would probably place her in foster care while they searched for relatives or try to find her an adoptive family. The idea of this little girl ending up in the system bothered Marcus more than he expected. He had heard too many stories about children getting lost in foster care, moving from home to home without ever finding stability. After everything she had been through, she deserved better than that. On the 5th day after finding the baby, Marcus was sitting in the hospital cafeteria when Detective Chun approached his table. She looked tired and frustrated, which Marcus took as a bad sign. "Any progress?" he asked as she sat down across from him. "Some, but not enough," Chun replied. "We've identified the tire tracks as belonging to a common type of pickup truck. We're working through a list of vehicles that match, but it's going to take time. We've also been checking birth records and hospital records, trying to find mothers who gave birth around the right time and then disappeared." Marcus stirred his coffee absently. "What about DNA testing?" "We're working on that too, but it takes time to get results back. And even if we get a DNA profile, it only helps if the parents are in the system somewhere." Chin studied Marcus's face carefully. "Mr. Wellington, I have to ask you something, and I hope you won't take offense." Marcus looked up from his coffee. "What is it? Have you given any thought to what happens to this baby after she's released from the hospital? I mean, assuming we don't find any relatives who can take her." The question hit Marcus harder than he expected. He had been trying not to think about that possibility, but now it was right in front of him. "I suppose she'll go into foster care." "Most likely, yes. But there might be other options." Chun leaned forward slightly. "Mr. Wellington, I've seen a lot of cases like this over the years. This baby is going to need someone who can give her stability, someone who can help her heal from this trauma. Based on what I've observed this week, she seems to have formed some kind of attachment to you." Marcus felt his heart begin to race. "Detective, I'm not sure what you're suggesting." "I'm not suggesting anything specific. I'm just saying that if you were interested in exploring the possibility of becoming a foster parent, or even adopting her if she becomes available for adoption, there are people you could talk to." The idea was so unexpected that Marcus could not immediately respond. Him, a father? He was 62 years old, set in his ways, used to living alone. What did he know about raising a child, especially a baby girl who had been through such trauma? But even as these thoughts ran through his mind, Marcus found himself remembering the feeling of holding the baby in his truck, the way she had seemed to calm down when she heard his voice. He thought about going home to his empty house after she was placed somewhere else, never knowing if she was okay or if she was getting the love and care she needed. "I'll think about it," Marcus said finally. That evening, Marcus drove home to Silver Creek Ranch in silence, Detective Chen's words echoing in his mind. The storm had finally passed, leaving behind a landscape of pristine white snow that sparkled in the moonlight. The ranch looked peaceful and beautiful, but Marcus barely noticed. His thoughts were entirely focused on a tiny baby lying in a hospital crib an hour away. When he reached his house, Marcus sat in his truck for a long time before going inside. The house was large and well-appointed, but it had always felt more like a place to sleep between work days than a real home. For the first time in years, Marcus found himself imagining what it might be like to have a child's laughter echoing through those quiet rooms. As he finally walked up to his front door, Marcus made a decision that surprised him with its clarity and certainty. Tomorrow, he would call the social services department and begin the process of becoming a foster parent. He did not know if he would be approved or if the baby would be placed with him, but he had to try. This little girl had already survived the unthinkable. The least he could do was give her a chance at a real family, even if he was not the kind of father anyone would expect. Marcus Wellington, the tough ranch owner who had never shown weakness, was about to embark on the biggest challenge of his life. And for the first time in decades, he was not thinking about cattle or profits or business decisions. He was thinking about a 3-day-old baby who had been thrown away like garbage, and how he might be able to give her the love and security she deserved. The investigation would continue, and Detective Chun would keep searching for the people who had tried to murder an innocent child. But regardless of what they found, Marcus knew his life had been changed forever by the soft cry of "Mama" he thought he had heard in that cold, dark shed. Little did he know that the real mystery was just beginning, and that the truth about who had abandoned the baby would lead him down a path he never could have imagined. 3 weeks after finding the baby, Marcus Wellington sat in a sterile conference room at the Department of Social Services, feeling more nervous than he had in years. Across from him sat Linda Morrison, a social worker with kind eyes and graying hair who had been evaluating his application to become a foster parent. The process had been intensive, involving background checks, home inspections, and hours of interviews. "Mr. Wellington," Linda said, reviewing the thick file in front of her, "I have to admit, your case is unusual. Most people who apply to foster infants are younger couples or single women. It's rare to see a 62-year-old bachelor rancher wanting to care for a baby." Marcus shifted in his chair. "I understand that. But I found her, and I feel responsible for her well-being. I have the resources to provide for her, and I live in a safe environment." Linda nodded thoughtfully. "Your background check came back clean, and your financial situation is certainly stable. The home inspection showed that you've already begun making modifications to accommodate a child. But I have to ask, Mr. Wellington, what happens when this baby becomes a toddler who needs constant supervision? What about when she becomes a teenager with emotional needs you might not understand?" These were questions Marcus had been asking himself every day. "I know I have a lot to learn, but I'm willing to do whatever it takes. I can hire help when needed, and I'm prepared to make whatever changes are necessary to give her a good life." Linda studied him carefully. "The baby, who we're temporarily calling Anna until either her parents are found or she receives a permanent name, has been through significant trauma. She's going to need someone who can provide not just physical care, but emotional stability and nurturing. Based on what I know about your background, those aren't qualities you've had to demonstrate much in your professional life." Marcus knew she was right, but he also knew something had fundamentally changed in him since finding Anna. "I understand your concerns, but I've spent the last 3 weeks visiting her every day. The nurses say she responds positively to me. I may not have experience with children, but I'm committed to learning." The meeting continued for another hour, with Linda explaining the requirements and expectations if Marcus were approved. He would need to complete parenting classes, undergo regular visits from social workers, and be prepared for the possibility that Anna might eventually be reunited with biological family members if they were found. By the end of the meeting, Linda had agreed to recommend Marcus for provisional foster care, with the understanding that Anna would initially stay with him on a trial basis while the investigation into her abandonment continued. 2 days later, Marcus brought Anna home to Silver Creek Ranch. She was now a month old and had gained weight during her hospital stay, but she was still tiny and fragile. Marcus had converted one of his guest bedrooms into a nursery, complete with a crib, changing table, and rocking chair. He had also hired Mrs. Eleanor Vasquez, an experienced nanny, to help him during the transition. Mrs. Vasquez was a 60-year-old woman who had raised 6 children of her own and worked as a nanny for several families over the years. She was patient with Marcus as he struggled to learn the basics of baby care, from changing diapers to preparing formula to understanding different types of cries. "Mr. Wellington," she said gently as Marcus fumbled with a diaper, "babies can sense when you're nervous. Try to relax and move more slowly." Marcus found that caring for Anna was both more difficult and more rewarding than he had expected. The sleepless nights were exhausting, but he discovered a deep satisfaction in being able to comfort her when she cried or seeing her tiny smile when she looked at him. Meanwhile, Detective Chun continued her investigation into Anna's abandonment. She had expanded her search to include neighboring counties and was working with the FBI to check for similar cases in other states. The DNA results had come back, but without any matches in the system, they provided no immediate leads. Chin visited Marcus regularly to update him on the progress and to observe Anna's condition. During one of these visits, about 6 weeks after Marcus had taken Anna home, Chun brought some disturbing news. "Mr. Wellington," she said as they sat in his living room while Anna slept in her crib, "we've uncovered some information that makes this case more complicated than we initially thought." Marcus looked up from the parenting book he had been reading. What kind of information? Chin pulled out a manila folder. We've been investigating reports of unusual activity in the area around the time Anna was abandoned. It turns out there may have been a human trafficking operation working through this region. The words hit Marcus like a physical blow. Human trafficking? You think Anna was connected to that? We're not sure yet, but there are some concerning patterns. We found evidence of young women being moved through this area, possibly against their will. Some of these women were pregnant. Chen's voice was grim. If Anna's mother was being trafficked, it could explain why the baby was abandoned rather than placed for adoption through legal channels. Marcus felt sick thinking about the possibilities. So her mother might not have chosen to abandon her? That's what we're trying to determine. If the mother was being held against her will, she might have hidden the baby to protect her from the traffickers. Abandoning Anna in that shed might have been an act of desperation, not cruelty. This new information changed everything for Marcus. Instead of imagining Anna's mother as someone callous enough to leave a baby to die, he now had to consider that she might have been a victim herself, making an impossible choice to save her child's life. Chen continued, "We're working with federal agents who specialize in trafficking cases. They've identified a network that operated through several Western states, moving young women for various forms of exploitation. The operation was shut down about 2 months ago, right around the time Anna would have been born. What happened to the women who were being trafficked? Some were rescued and are receiving help. Others disappeared during the raid. We're trying to track down every woman who might have been pregnant and see if any of them match Anna's timeline." As the investigation continued, Marcus found himself becoming more protective of Anna. The thought that she might have been born into such horrific circumstances made him even more determined to give her a safe and loving home. He also began to hope that somewhere out there, a young woman was wondering if her baby had survived and was being cared for. Mrs. Vasquez noticed the change in Marcus's demeanor. "You're holding her tighter these days," she observed one morning as Marcus fed Anna her bottle. "I keep thinking about her mother," Marcus admitted. "If she was forced to give birth in those conditions and then had to abandon Anna to save her life, I can't imagine what she went through." Mrs. Vasquez nodded sympathetically. "Perhaps someday Anna will be able to thank her mother for the sacrifice she made. But right now, she needs you to focus on giving her a good life." Marcus had been caring for Anna for 3 months when Detective Chun called with significant news. "Mr. Wellington, we may have found Anna's mother." Marcus's heart began racing. "What do you mean?" "The federal task force identified a young woman named Maria Santos who was rescued from the trafficking operation. She was pregnant when she was taken, and she gave birth to a daughter around the time Anna was abandoned. Maria has been receiving treatment at a secure facility, but she's now well enough to be interviewed." Marcus felt a mixture of hope and fear. "Does she want to see Anna?" "She's asked about her daughter every day since she was rescued." The agents didn't know what had happened to the baby until now. "Mr. Wellington, I need to prepare you for the possibility that if Maria is confirmed to be Anna's mother, the situation could become complicated." "What do you mean?" "If Maria is Anna's biological mother and she's capable of caring for her, the goal would typically be reunification. However, given the trauma Maria has experienced and Anna's attachment to you, the situation will require careful evaluation." Marcus felt his world tilting. He had known this possibility existed, but over the past 3 months, he had begun thinking of Anna as his daughter. The idea of losing her was almost unbearable. 2 days later, Chin arranged for a DNA test to confirm whether Maria Santos was Anna's mother. While they waited for results, Marcus spent every moment with Anna, trying to memorize her expressions and the way she felt in his arms. Mrs. Vasquez noticed his distress. "Mr. Wellington, you need to remember that what's best for Anna is what matters most. If her biological mother is healthy and able to care for her, that might be what she needs." Marcus knew Mrs. Vasquez was right, but knowing it intellectually and accepting it emotionally were different things. He had never experienced love like what he felt for Anna, and the thought of giving her up was devastating. The DNA results came back positive. Maria Santos was definitely Anna's mother. Chin arranged a meeting between Marcus and Maria at the facility where she was staying. Marcus was nervous as he drove there, unsure what to expect. Maria was a 22-year-old woman from Guatemala who had been brought to the United States under false promises of legitimate work. She had been held by traffickers for over a year before being rescued. When Marcus met Maria, he was struck by how young and fragile she looked. Her English was limited, but with the help of a translator, she was able to tell him her story. Maria explained that she had been held at a remote location with several other women. When she went into labor, the traffickers were angry because they had not known she was pregnant. They told her they would kill the baby if she caused any problems. I hid her birth as much as possible, Maria said through the translator, tears streaming down her face. But I knew they would discover her soon. I heard them talking about getting rid of her. Marcus listened with growing horror as Maria described how she had managed to sneak out during a storm, carrying Anna in whatever she could find. The ice in the sack had been intended to mask Anna's scent in case dogs were used to track them. I found that building, and I prayed someone would find her quickly, Maria continued. I cannot take her with me, because they would have killed us both. I hoped if I left her somewhere people might look, she would have a chance. Marcus realized that Maria's abandonment of Anna had not been an act of cruelty, but an act of tremendous love and sacrifice. She had given up her own chance of escape to save her daughter's life. I stayed hidden and watched until I saw a truck come, Maria said. I saw a man find her and take her away quickly. I prayed he was a good man who would help her. Marcus was overcome with emotion. You saved her life. If you hadn't done what you did, she would have been killed. Maria asked about Anna's condition and how she was being cared for. Marcus showed her photos on his phone and told her about Anna's recovery and how she was thriving. Maria smiled through her tears as she looked at the pictures. She looks healthy and happy, Maria said. You've been good to her. The conversation that followed was one of the most difficult of Marcus's life. Maria explained that while she loved Anna deeply, she was not in a position to care for her properly. The trauma she had experienced would require years of therapy to overcome. She had no family in the United States, no job skills, and no support system. I want what is best for my daughter, Maria said. If you are willing to continue caring for her, and if you would let me see her sometimes, I would be grateful. Marcus was stunned. He had expected Maria to want Anna back immediately. Instead, she was asking him to consider adopting her daughter while maintaining some connection between them. Over the next several weeks, with the help of social workers, therapists, and legal advisors, a plan was developed. Maria would voluntarily relinquish her parental rights to allow Marcus to adopt Anna, but they would maintain regular contact so that Anna could grow up knowing her birth mother and understanding her story. The arrangement was unusual, but everyone involved agreed it was in Anna's best interest. Maria would receive ongoing support as she rebuilt her life, while Anna would grow up with Marcus as her father, but also with knowledge of her biological mother's love and sacrifice. 6 months later, Marcus officially adopted Anna Wellington. Maria attended the court hearing, and afterward they took photos together as a family. It was not a traditional family by any means, but it was built on love, sacrifice, and the shared commitment to give Anna the best life possible. Detective Chin closed the case with mixed feelings. The trafficking ring had been shut down, and several perpetrators were in prison, but she knew there were still countless other victims who had not been rescued. Anna's story, however, had ended with hope. Marcus transformed from solitary rancher into a devoted father almost overnight. He restructured his business to allow him more time at home, hired additional help to manage the ranch operations, and threw himself into learning everything he could about child development and parenting. Mrs. Vasquez remained as Anna's nanny and became like a grandmother to her. The three of them, along with regular visits from Maria, created an unconventional but loving family structure. Anna thrived in this environment. She was a happy, curious baby who showed no signs of the trauma she had experienced in her first days of life. Marcus often thought about how different things might have been if he had not decided to investigate that shed during the storm. As Anna grew, Marcus planned to tell her the full story of how she came to be his daughter, including her mother's heroic sacrifice and the circumstances that brought them together. He wanted her to understand that she was a child who had been fought for and protected by multiple people who loved her. The Silver Creek Ranch, which had once been a place focused solely on business and profit, gradually transformed into a real home filled with the sounds of Anna's laughter and the warmth of family life. Marcus discovered that success in business meant nothing compared to the joy of being Anna's father. But even as they settled into their new life together, Marcus knew their story was not over. There would be challenges ahead as Anna grew up, questions about her identity and origins, and the complex navigation of maintaining relationships with both her adoptive father and birth mother. However, he was confident that with love, patience, and commitment, they could face whatever came next together. 5 years had passed since Marcus Wellington first found baby Anna in that cold shed. The Silver Creek Ranch had transformed from a purely business operation into a warm family home where a bright, energetic 5-year-old girl filled every room with laughter and curiosity. Anna Wellington was no longer the tiny, fragile infant who had nearly frozen to death. She was a spirited child with dark curls, bright brown eyes, and an endless stream of questions about everything around her. Marcus, now 67, had adapted to fatherhood with a determination that surprised everyone who knew him, including himself. The man who once worked 16-hour days focused solely on cattle and profits now scheduled his entire life around Anna's needs. He attended every doctor's appointment, every preschool event, and spent hours reading bedtime stories and answering questions about why horses sleep standing up and where clouds come from. Mrs. Vasquez had become an integral part of their family. She no longer worked as just a nanny, but had taken on the role of grandmother, teaching Anna to bake cookies, speaking to her in Spanish, and sharing stories about her own children and grandchildren. Anna called her Abuela Elena, and Mrs. Vasquez glowed with pride whenever she heard it. Maria Santos had also remained a constant presence in Anna's life. Now 27, Maria had worked hard to rebuild herself after the trauma she had endured. With the help of therapy, education programs, and the support network provided by victim services, she had learned English, earned her GED, and was studying to become a certified nursing assistant. She visited Anna once a month, and they spoke on video calls every week. Anna knew Maria as her birth mother and understood, in simple terms appropriate for her age, that Maria had made a difficult choice to keep her safe when she was a baby. Marcus had been careful to frame the story in a way that honored Maria's sacrifice while not frightening Anna with details she was too young to understand. Maria is the brave lady who made sure you were found by someone who could take care of you, Marcus would explain when Anna asked questions. And I'm a lucky daddy who got to love you and raise you. Life at Silver Creek Ranch had settled into comfortable routines. Anna attended kindergarten at the local elementary school, where she was popular with her classmates and beloved by her teachers. She was an excellent student who loved books and art projects, but she also thrived in the outdoor environment of the ranch. She could ride a gentle horse named Buttercup, helped feed the chickens, and knew the names of all the ranch dogs. Marcus had hired Jake Morrison's daughter, Sarah, to help manage the ranch operations so he could spend more time with Anna. Sarah was a capable ranch manager who had grown up on a neighboring property and understood cattle ranching as well as anyone. This arrangement allowed Marcus to maintain his business while being present for all the important moments in Anna's childhood. The routine of their peaceful life was disrupted one October morning when Detective Sarah Chun called with news that would change everything again. "Marcus, I need to come out to the ranch to talk to you," Chun said, her voice carrying a tension that immediately put Marcus on alert. "It's about Anna's case." "I thought that case was closed," Marcus replied, feeling a familiar knot form in his stomach. "The trafficking ring was shut down, and Maria's situation was resolved years ago. There have been some new developments. I'd rather discuss them in person. Can I come out this afternoon? Marcus agreed, though he spent the rest of the morning worrying about what Chun might have discovered. Anna was at school, which was probably for the best. Whatever this news was, Marcus wanted to understand it fully before deciding how much, if anything, to share with her. Chun arrived at the ranch just as Anna was getting off the school bus. Marcus watched through the window as his daughter ran up the driveway, her backpack bouncing, eager to tell him about her day. She had no idea that her world might be about to change again. "Daddy!" Anna burst through the front door with the energy that characterized everything she did. "We learned about butterflies today, and Mrs. Peterson said we might get to watch some caterpillars turn into butterflies next month." Marcus hugged her tightly, breathing in the scent of her hair and feeling the solid warmth of her small body. Whatever Chun was about to tell him, his love for this child was unshakable. "That sounds wonderful, sweetheart. Mrs. Vasquez is in the kitchen making her favorite snacks. Why don't you go tell her about the butterflies while I talk to Detective Chun?" Anna noticed Chun for the first time and gave her a shy wave. Chun smiled warmly and waved back, but Marcus could see the concern in her eyes. After Anna had run off to find Mrs. Vasquez, Marcus led Chun to his study and closed the door. "What's going on, Sarah?" Chun pulled out a file folder and set it on Marcus's desk. 3 weeks ago, we arrested a man named Viktor Kozlov in connection with a credit card fraud ring in Denver. During questioning, he started talking about other crimes he'd been involved in, including the human trafficking operation that we believe Anna's mother was part of. Marcus felt his heart rate increase. "What did he say?" "Kozlov claims that Anna's mother wasn't the only pregnant woman in that operation. He says there were others, and that some of their babies were sold rather than killed." Chin's voice was steady, but Marcus could see the anger in her eyes. "He's offering information about these other cases in exchange for a reduced sentence." The implications hit Marcus like a physical blow. "Are you saying there might be other children out there like Anna?" "That's exactly what I'm saying. Kozlov has provided names, dates, and locations. We're trying to verify his information, but some of it has already checked out." Chin opened the folder and pulled out a photograph. "Marcus, he also provided this." Marcus looked at the photo and felt the world tilt around him. It was a picture of Maria Santos, but she was standing next to another young woman who looked remarkably similar to her. Both women appeared to be pregnant. "Who is the other woman?" Marcus asked, though he had a sinking feeling he already knew the answer. "Her name is Carmen Santos. She's Maria's younger sister." Marcus stared at the photograph, his mind racing. Maria had never mentioned having a sister. According to Kozlov, Carmen was trafficked separately from Maria. The operation deliberately kept family members apart to prevent them from supporting each other or planning escapes together. Chin's voice was gentle but relentless. "Marcus, Carmen gave birth to a daughter 2 days before Maria gave birth to Anna." The room seemed to spin around Marcus. "You're telling me that Anna might have a cousin? Another baby from this same operation?" "Not just a cousin. According to Kozlov's timeline and the information we're uncovering, Carmen's baby was born on January 15th, exactly 2 days before Anna. Carmen disappeared during the raid that shut down the trafficking operation, and her baby has never been found." Marcus sat heavily in his chair, trying to process this information. "What are you saying exactly?" Chun leaned forward. "Marcus, we have reason to believe that Carmen's baby might have been sold to adoptive parents who didn't know the child's true origins. There could be another little girl out there, the same age as Anna, who was born into this same nightmare situation." The thought was overwhelming. For 5 years, Marcus had believed that Anna's case was unique, a terrible crime that had ended with her rescue and adoption. Now he was learning that there might be other children, other families affected by the same criminal operation. "What does this mean for Anna?" Marcus asked, voicing his greatest fear. "It doesn't change anything about Anna's legal status or your family," Chen reassured him quickly. "Anna is your daughter, legally and in every way that matters. But we think Maria might be able to help us find her sister and niece." Carmen might be the key to solving several other cases. Marcus thought about Maria, who had worked so hard to rebuild her life after the trauma she had endured. Have you told Maria about this yet? Not yet. I wanted to talk to you first because any conversation with Maria will likely involve Anna, at least indirectly. If Carmen is found, or if we locate her daughter, there would probably be contact between the families. The study door opened slightly, and Anna peeked in. Daddy, Abuela Elena wants to know if Detective Chun is staying for dinner. Marcus looked at his daughter, so innocent and unaware of the complicated emotions swirling around her. What do you think, sweetheart? Should we invite Detective Chun to stay? Anna nodded enthusiastically. She could try Abuela's enchiladas. They're the best in the whole world. Chun smiled despite the serious conversation they'd been having. I'd love to stay for dinner, Anna. Thank you for inviting me. After Anna skipped away, Marcus turned back to Chun. When are you planning to contact Maria? Tomorrow. I wanted to give you time to process this information first. I also wanted to ask if you'd be willing to be present when I talk to her. This news is going to be devastating for her, and she trusts you. Marcus nodded. Of course, but I want to be careful about how much Anna is exposed to all of this. She's only 5, and she doesn't need to be burdened with adult problems. Absolutely. We'll handle this as sensitively as possible. That evening at dinner, Anna chattered happily about school, her friends, and her plans for the weekend. Mrs. Vasquez had indeed made enchiladas, and Chun praised them genuinely, earning Anna's approval. Watching his daughter interact so naturally with Chun, Marcus realized how secure and confident Anna had become over the years. She was a child who felt safe and loved, with no awareness of the dark circumstances that had brought her into the world. After Anna went to bed, Marcus found himself standing in her doorway, watching her sleep. Her room was filled with stuffed animals, picture books, and artwork she'd created. On her nightstand was a framed photo of her with Marcus, Mrs. Vasquez, and Maria taken during one of Maria's visits. It was the picture of a loved child who belonged to a family, even if that family was unconventional. The next day, Chun arranged to meet with Maria at the Victim Services Center where she sometimes received counseling. Marcus drove there with a heavy heart, knowing that the news about Carmen would reopen wounds that Maria had worked hard to heal. Maria arrived looking nervous, but stronger than Marcus had seen her in years. Her English had improved dramatically, and she carried herself with more confidence. She had recently started her new job as a nursing assistant and was clearly proud of her accomplishments. Marcus! Maria smiled when she saw him. How is Anna? I saw the pictures you sent of her school play. She's wonderful, Marcus replied, hugging Maria briefly. She can't wait to see you this weekend. Chun gestured for them to sit in a comfortable seating area away from other people. Maria, I asked Marcus to be here because I have some news that's going to be difficult to hear, and I thought you might want his support. Maria's expression immediately became guarded. What kind of news? Chun explained about Viktor Kozlov's arrest and the information he had provided. As she spoke, Maria's face grew pale, and her hands began to shake. Carmen, Maria whispered. You found information about Carmen? We found information about what happened to her during the time you were both being held. Maria, we didn't know you had a sister. Maria's eyes filled with tears. They told me she was dead. When they captured me, I asked about my family, and they said everyone in my village had been killed. I believed them. Marcus reached over and took Maria's hand, offering what comfort he could. He had not known about Carmen either, and he could only imagine what Maria was feeling. Carmen was pregnant when she was taken, Maria asked through her tears. Yes. According to our information, she gave birth to a daughter around the same time Anna was born. Maria stood up abruptly and began pacing, her emotional control cracking. Where is she? Where's Carmen? Where's her baby? We don't know yet, Chun admitted, but we're looking for them. Maria, we need your help. Any information you can give us about Carmen, about your family, about anything you might remember from that time could help us find them. Maria turned to Marcus with desperation in her eyes. Anna has a cousin. A little girl the same age, and I never knew she existed. How could I not know? Marcus stood and gently guided Maria back to her chair. You couldn't have known. They deliberately kept information from you to maintain control. This isn't your fault. Over the next hour, Maria shared everything she could remember about Carmen. Her sister was 2 years younger, had always been artistic, and dreamed of becoming a teacher. Carmen had been in the next village over when the traffickers came through their region, which explained why the sisters had been captured separately. Carmen was always braver than me, Maria said. If she had a baby, she would have done anything to protect that child. Chin took detailed notes and promised to follow up on every lead. As the meeting concluded, she emphasized that finding Carmen and her daughter would be a long process that might not have a happy ending. I need to prepare you for the possibility that we might not find them alive, Chen said gently. It's been over 5 years, and we don't know what happened to them after the raid. Maria nodded, but Marcus could see the determination in her eyes. I understand, but I have to try to find them. Anna should know her cousin, if she's out there. Driving back to the ranch, Marcus felt overwhelmed by the complexity of the situation. Anna's simple, happy life was about to become much more complicated. There would be searches, investigations, and possibly heartbreaking discoveries. But there was also the possibility of finding another child who needed help and potentially reuniting Maria with her sister. That evening, Marcus sat Anna down for a gentle conversation about family. He explained that Maria had a sister named Carmen who had been lost for a long time, and that Carmen might have a little girl around Anna's age. So, I might have a cousin? Anna asked, her eyes wide with interest rather than concern. Maybe, Marcus said carefully. We're trying to find out. But it might take a long time, and we might not find them. Anna thought about this seriously. If we find my cousin, can she come play with me? Marcus smiled despite his worries. If we find her, I'm sure you'll get to meet her. As Anna went to bed that night, she asked Mrs. Vasquez to include Carmen and the unknown little girl in their bedtime prayers. Mrs. Vasquez agreed, and Marcus felt a surge of pride in the compassionate child Anna was becoming. The search for Carmen Santos and her daughter was about to begin, and Marcus knew it would test their family in ways they had never experienced. But he also knew that they would face whatever came next together, with love and determination. Anna deserved to know about her extended family, and if there was another child out there who needed help, they would do everything in their power to find her. The peaceful chapter of their lives was ending, but Marcus hoped that what came next would bring healing and completion to Maria's family story, even if the journey would be difficult and uncertain. The investigation into Carmen Santos and her missing daughter consumed the next 8 months of their lives. Detective Chun worked tirelessly with federal agents, following every lead that Victor Kozlov had provided. The search took them across 3 states as they tracked down other victims of the trafficking operation and investigated reports of illegal adoptions that had taken place around the time of Anna's birth. Marcus found himself drawn deeper into the investigation than he had ever expected. His business background and analytical skills proved helpful in organizing the complex information they were uncovering. More importantly, his financial resources allowed him to hire private investigators to supplement the official investigation. He was determined to find Carmen's daughter, not just for Maria's sake, but because he now understood how many children might have been affected by this criminal network. Maria threw herself into the search with an intensity that worried everyone around her. She had put her nursing assistant career on hold to focus entirely on finding her sister and niece. She spent hours reviewing documents, looking at photographs of potential matches, and making phone calls to anyone who might have information. The process was taking an emotional toll on her, but she refused to give up. Anna, now 6 years old and in first grade, was aware that something important was happening, but didn't fully understand the gravity of the situation. She knew they were looking for her Aunt Carmen and a cousin she had never met. In a way children do, she had incorporated this into her understanding of the world without being overly concerned about it. When we find my cousin, I'm going to teach her how to ride Buttercup, Anna announced one morning over breakfast. And we can share my toys and have sleepovers every weekend. Marcus smiled at his daughter's optimism while feeling the weight of responsibility to manage her expectations. He didn't want to discourage her excitement about potentially having a cousin, but he also needed to prepare her for the possibility that they might not find the girl, or that if they did find her, the situation might be complicated. The breakthrough came in March, almost 9 months after the investigation began. Chun called Marcus early on a Tuesday morning with news that made his heart race. "Marcus, we found her. We found Carmen's daughter." Marcus nearly dropped his phone. "Are you sure?" DNA confirmed it. Her name is Isabella, and she's been living with an adoptive family in Colorado. The adoptive parents had no idea about her true origins. They went through what they believed was a legitimate private adoption agency. Marcus felt a mixture of relief, joy, and anxiety. "How is she? Is she okay?" "Physically, she appears to be fine. She's healthy, well cared for, and clearly loved by her adoptive family. But, Marcus, this situation is incredibly complex." Chin went on to explain that Isabella had been adopted by David and Jennifer Morrison, a couple who had struggled with infertility for years before deciding to pursue private adoption. They had been approached by what appeared to be a legitimate adoption agency and had paid substantial fees for what they believed was a legal adoption of a baby whose mother could not care for her. "The Morrisons are devastated," Chin continued. "They've raised Isabella for 6 years, believing she was legally theirs. They had no idea she had been stolen from her mother." Marcus thought about his own situation with Anna and how he would feel if someone told him that Anna's adoption was not legitimate. The difference, of course, was that Anna had truly been abandoned and needed rescue, while Isabella had apparently been taken from her mother and sold. "What about Carmen?" Marcus asked. "Have you found her?" Chin's voice became somber. "That's the difficult part. We have evidence that Carmen died about 3 years ago. She was found in a homeless shelter in Phoenix, but she was using a false identity and was never connected to the trafficking case. By the time we identified her, she had already been buried in an unmarked grave." The news hit Marcus like a physical blow. Carmen had survived the trafficking operation only to die alone and unidentified, never knowing what had happened to her daughter. The tragedy of it was overwhelming. "Does Isabella know any of this?" Marcus asked. "Not yet. The Morrisons are working with child psychologists to determine how and when to explain the situation to her. She's the same age as Anna, and this is going to be traumatic for her regardless of how it's handled." Marcus knew he needed to tell Maria about both the good news and the devastating news. Finding Isabella alive and what would bring her joy, but learning about Carmen's death would be crushing. That evening, Marcus called Maria and asked her to come to the ranch. When she arrived, Anna was asleep, and Marcus, Mrs. Vasquez, and Maria sat in the living room where so many important conversations had taken place over the years. Marcus broke the news as gently as he could. Maria's reaction was exactly what he had expected. She cried with relief when she learned that Isabella was alive and safe, but she sobbed with grief when she heard about Carmen's death. "She died alone," Maria whispered. "She died thinking her baby was gone forever, and I was here building a new life." Mrs. Vasquez moved to comfort Maria, speaking softly in Spanish and reminding her that she could not have known, could not have changed what happened. "But Isabella is alive," Marcus said gently. "Carmen's daughter is alive and healthy, and now you have a chance to be part of her life." Maria wiped her tears and looked up with determination in her eyes. "I want to meet her. I want to tell her about her mother and make sure she knows she was loved." The process of arranging a meeting between Maria and Isabella was delicate and complex. The Morrisons, despite their shock and grief over learning the truth about Isabella's origins, proved to be caring people who wanted what was best for the little girl they had raised as their own daughter. Jennifer Morrison, an elementary school teacher, and David Morrison, an engineer, had provided Isabella with a loving home, excellent education, and all the opportunities they could offer. Isabella was a bright, artistic child who loved to draw and paint, just as her mother Carmen had been artistic. The first meeting was arranged through the Victim Services Center, with child psychologists present to help navigate the emotional complexity of the situation. Marcus brought Anna, thinking that having another child present might make Isabella feel more comfortable. Maria was visibly nervous as they waited in the conference room. She had brought a photo album containing pictures of Carmen from their childhood, hoping to help Isabella understand who her mother had been. When the Morrisons arrived with Isabella, Marcus was struck by how much she resembled Anna. Both girls had dark hair and brown eyes, and their facial features showed their family connection clearly. Isabella was shyer than Anna and stayed close to Jennifer Morrison, whom she called Mom. "Isabella," Jennifer said gently, "this is Maria, who is your birth mother's sister. She's your aunt." Isabella looked at Maria with curiosity, but without understanding. At 6 years old, the concept of birth family versus adoptive family was confusing, especially when she had never known she was adopted. Anna, true to her outgoing nature, immediately introduced herself. "Hi, Isabella. I'm Anna, and I think we're cousins. Do you like horses? I have a horse named Buttercup." The simplicity of Anna's approach seemed to put Isabella at ease. The two girls began talking about horses, school, and their favorite colors while the adults watched nervously. Maria showed Isabella the photo album, explaining that the woman in the pictures was her birth mother, Carmen. "She was very artistic, just like you," Maria said, looking at some of Isabella's drawings that Jennifer had brought. "She will be so proud of your beautiful art." Isabella studied the photos carefully. "She looks like me," she observed. "Yes, she does. And you look like Anna too, because you're cousins." Over the following months, a careful plan was developed to help Isabella understand her origins and maintain connections with both families. The Morrisons, despite their initial shock, proved to be remarkably generous in their willingness to include Maria and Marcus's family in Isabella's life. "We love Isabella, and we want to know all the people who love her," David Morrison explained. "Learning the truth about how she came to us is painful, but it doesn't change how much we care about her." Regular visits were arranged, allowing Isabella to develop a relationship with Maria and to bond with Anna as her cousin. The girls quickly became close friends, despite their different personalities. Isabella was more reserved and artistic, while Anna was outgoing and adventurous, but they complemented each other well. Marcus found himself becoming a sort of uncle figure to Isabella, just as he had become Anna's father. The Morrisons appreciated having additional adults who cared about Isabella's well-being, and they often coordinated family activities that included both families. One of the most meaningful moments came when Isabella asked Maria to tell her more about her birth mother. Maria shared stories about Carmen's childhood, her dreams of becoming a teacher, and her love of art and music. "Your mother was very brave," Maria told Isabella. "Even though bad things happened to her, she never stopped loving you. Everything she did was to try to keep you safe." Isabella absorbed this information seriously. "Did she draw pictures like I do?" "Yes, she did. She was always drawing and painting. She would have loved to see your artwork." As the family relationships stabilized, Isabella expressed a desire to visit Carmen's gravesite in Phoenix. The Morrisons agreed, and they organized a trip that included both families. It was a difficult but healing experience for everyone involved. At the cemetery, Maria placed flowers on Carmen's unmarked grave, while Isabella drew a picture to leave there. The drawing showed two little girls holding hands under a rainbow with the words "For my birth mom" written in careful first-grade handwriting. Anna stood solemnly next to her cousin, understanding that this was an important and sad moment, even if she didn't fully comprehend all the emotions involved. The experience brought both families closer together and helped Isabella process her complex feelings about having two families who loved her. She began to understand that she could love and be loved by the Morrisons who had raised her, while also honoring the memory of Carmen and maintaining her relationship with Maria. Back at Silver Creek Ranch, life took on new rhythms that included regular visits from Isabella and the Morrisons. The ranch became a gathering place where both girls could play freely while the adults worked through the ongoing emotional complexities of their situation. Mrs. Vasquez embraced Isabella, just as she had embraced Anna, teaching both girls to cook traditional Mexican dishes and sharing stories from her own childhood. Isabella began calling her Abuela Elena, too, creating another bridge between the two families. Detective Chun continued to work on other cases that had emerged from Victor Kozlov's information. Several other children who had been trafficked or illegally adopted were located and reunited with family members when possible. The investigation had grown into a major federal case that was helping to shut down other similar operations across the country. For Marcus, the experience had been both exhausting and deeply meaningful. He had started as a single man trying to save one abandoned baby, and now he found himself at the center of an extended family that included multiple children, parents, and connections across several states. Anna, now 7 years old and in second grade, had adapted to her expanded family with the resilience that characterized childhood. She loved having Isabella as a cousin and didn't seem bothered by the complexity of their family structure. For her, family was simply the people who loved her and showed up for important events. "Daddy," Anna said one evening as Marcus tucked her into bed, "I'm glad we found Isabella. She makes Maria happy, and she's really good at drawing horses." Marcus smiled and kissed his daughter's forehead. "I'm glad we found her too, sweetheart. Sometimes families come together in unexpected ways." As he turned off Anna's bedroom light, Marcus reflected on how much their lives had changed since that snowy morning when he found a baby in a sack of ice. What had begun as a rescue had evolved into a complex story of family, loss, love, and the power of people to care for children who needed them. The investigation was winding down, but the relationships they had built would last for the rest of their lives. Isabella would grow up knowing her history and understanding the sacrifices that had been made for her safety. Anna would grow up with a cousin who shared her background and understood her story. And Maria would have the opportunity to know her sister's daughter and help keep Carmen's memory alive. It was not the ending any of them would have chosen, but it was an ending filled with hope, love, and the knowledge that even in the darkest circumstances, people could find ways to protect and care for each other. 10 years had passed since Marcus Wellington first discovered Anna in that frozen shed. The Silver Creek Ranch had evolved into something he never could have imagined during his bachelor days. What was once a sterile business operation had become the heart of an extended family that stretched across multiple states and connected people who might never have met under different circumstances. Anna, now 15 years old and a sophomore in high school, had grown into a confident, compassionate young woman who carried herself with a quiet strength that came from understanding her own survival story. She was an excellent student with a particular talent for writing and journalism, often contributing articles to the school newspaper about social issues and community service projects. Isabella, also 15, had developed into a gifted artist whose paintings and drawings reflected both the trauma of her early separation from her birth family and the healing that had come through being loved by multiple families. She had recently won a statewide art competition with a piece titled Two Mothers, which depicted the hands of different women reaching toward the same child, each offering protection and love. The girls had grown up more like sisters than cousins, spending summers together at the ranch and maintaining a constant stream of communication through texts, video calls, and shared social media accounts. Their bond had become one of the strongest relationships in both their lives, built on shared origins, mutual understanding, and genuine friendship. Marcus, now 72, had slowed down considerably, but remained sharp and engaged. He had turned over most of the ranch operations to Jake Morrison's son, Tom, who had returned from college with an agriculture degree and fresh ideas about sustainable ranching. This arrangement allowed Marcus to focus on what had become his greatest passion, advocating for victims of human trafficking and supporting legislation to strengthen laws against child trafficking. Maria Santos, now 32, had completed her nursing degree and specialized in trauma care. She worked at a medical center that treated trafficking victims and other survivors of serious crimes. Her own experiences had given her unique insight into what patients needed during their recovery process. She had never married, choosing instead to dedicate her life to helping others and maintaining strong relationships with Anna and Isabella. Mrs. Eleanor Vasquez, now 70, had officially retired but continued to live in the small house on the ranch property that Marcus had built for her. She spent her days gardening, reading to children at the local library, and serving as the unofficial grandmother to both Anna and Isabella. Her presence provided stability and wisdom that anchored the entire extended family. The Morrisons had remained an integral part of Isabella's life, while also becoming close friends with Marcus and Maria. David and Jennifer had handled the complex emotions around Isabella's origins with grace and maturity, never making her feel guilty for loving multiple families or confused about where she belonged. Their generosity had made it possible for Isabella to maintain connections with her birth family without feeling disloyal to the people who had raised her. Detective Sarah Chun, now retired, stayed in touch with the family and often spoke at conferences about the importance of investigating trafficking cases thoroughly and maintaining long-term support for survivors. The case that had started with Anna's rescue had led to a much larger investigation that had helped rescue dozens of other children and women from similar situations. On a warm Saturday afternoon in September, the extended family gathered at Silver Creek Ranch for Anna's 15th birthday celebration. It had become tradition to hold major celebrations at the ranch, where there was space for everyone to gather comfortably and children could run freely in the open spaces. Anna stood on the front porch of the ranch house, looking out at the scene before her. Isabella was setting up her easel near the barn, planning to paint during the golden hour before sunset. Maria was helping Mrs. Vasquez prepare food in the kitchen, their laughter floating through the open windows. The Morrisons were setting up tables and chairs on the lawn while Marcus supervised the setup of a volleyball net that the teenagers had requested. Several other families were also present. Over the years, Marcus had connected with other adoptive parents who had children with similar backgrounds, and they had formed an informal support network that met regularly and celebrated important milestones together. Anna and Isabella had friends who understood their unique family situations because they had lived through similar experiences. As Anna watched the bustling activity, she felt a profound sense of gratitude for the path her life had taken. She could not remember the trauma of her first few days of life, but she understood the magnitude of what had happened and how many people had worked to ensure her safety and happiness. Thinking deep thoughts, Isabella asked, joining Anna on the porch with her art supplies. Just feeling grateful, Anna replied. Look at all these people who are here because of us. Isabella followed her gaze across the yard. Sometimes I think about what would have happened if your dad hadn't found you that day. Would any of this exist? It was a question they had discussed many times over the years. The girls had grown up understanding that their lives were interconnected in ways that went beyond typical family relationships. Anna's rescue had led to the investigation that found Isabella, and Isabella's case had led to the discovery of other children who needed help. I think we would have found each other somehow, Anna said. Maybe not the same way, but I believe people who are meant to be family find each other. Marcus approached the porch, carrying 2 cold sodas. Happy birthday, sweetheart, he said, handing one to Anna and offering the other to Isabella. Are you ready for your party? Anna hugged her father tightly. Thank you for everything, Dad. Not just the party, but for everything. Marcus felt the familiar tightness in his throat that came whenever Anna expressed gratitude for the basic care and love that every child deserved. You don't need to thank me for loving you, Anna. That's just what fathers do. But Not every father would have done what you did. Not everyone would have taken in a baby they found in a shed and turned their whole life upside down. Marcus looked at his daughter, so mature and thoughtful for her 15 years. Anna, my life wasn't upside down when you came into it. It was right side up for the first time. As the afternoon progressed, the celebration took on the comfortable rhythms of a family gathering. The teenagers played volleyball while younger children ran around the yard and adults sat in chairs, catching up on each other's lives. Mrs. Vasquez emerged from the kitchen with Anna's favorite cake, a chocolate creation decorated with ranch-themed designs. During the cake ceremony, Marcus stood to make a toast. 15 years ago, I thought I knew what my life was about. I thought success meant having the biggest ranch and making the most money. Then, a storm brought me a gift that changed everything. He looked at Anna with tears in his eyes. Anna, you taught me what it means to be truly wealthy. Wealth isn't about what you own. It's about who you love and who loves you back. Anna felt tears welling up in her own eyes as she looked around at the faces surrounding her. These people represented a family that had been built through crisis, loss, determination, and love. It was not a traditional family by any definition, but it was strong and real and full of people who had chosen to care for each other. Maria stood next and raised her glass. I want to say something too. Anna, when I had to leave you in that shed, I prayed that someone good would find you. I prayed that you would be loved and cared for. My prayers were answered beyond anything I could have imagined. You have grown up to be exactly the kind of person your birth mother would be proud of, and exactly the kind of daughter Marcus deserves. Isabella, normally shy about speaking in groups, surprised everyone by standing up next. Anna, you're not just my cousin. You're my best friend and my inspiration. When I get scared about my own story and where I came from, I think about how strong you are and how you never let the bad things that happen define who you are. You help me be brave too. After the formal celebration wound down and the guests began to leave, the core family gathered in the living room for a quieter conclusion to the day. Anna curled up on the couch between Marcus and Maria, while Isabella sat on the floor leaning against Mrs. Vasquez's chair. Dad, Anna said, I've been thinking about what I want to do after high school. Marcus felt a familiar flutter of anxiety. Anna would be going to college soon, and while he was proud of her academic achievements, the thought of her leaving the ranch was difficult. What are you thinking about? I want to study journalism, but I want to focus on investigative reporting about human trafficking and missing persons cases. I want to tell stories like ours, but I also want to help find people who are still missing. Marcus was not surprised by Anna's career choice. She had always been drawn to stories about social justice and helping people who could not help themselves. That's important work, sweetheart, but it can also be dangerous and emotionally difficult. I know, but I think I have something to offer because of my background. I understand what it feels like to be a victim, but I also understand what recovery and healing look like. Maybe I can help tell those stories in a way that gives people hope. Maria smiled proudly. Anna, I think that's a beautiful way to use your experiences to help others. Isabella looked up from her sketchbook where she had been drawing during the conversation. Anna, if you become an investigative reporter, can I illustrate your articles? Or can sometimes say things that words can't? That would be perfect, Anna replied. We could be a team. Mrs. Vasquez chuckled softly. Two young women who survived terrible beginnings and now want to spend their lives helping other people survive terrible beginnings. Your mothers would be so proud. As the evening grew late and it was time for Isabella to return home with the Morrisons, the cousins hugged goodbye with the casual affection of siblings who knew they would see each other soon. Same time next month for your birthday? Anna asked Isabella. Definitely. And next summer, we're both going to be old enough to get real jobs. Maybe we can work together on something here at the ranch. After the Morrisons left with Isabella, and Maria had driven back to her apartment in Billings, the ranch settled into its nighttime quiet. Marcus walked through the house,